Belgium to Congo, turned it to hell. Rubber and ivory children fell. Britain snatched Nile, France took the West. Germany grabbed land like it passed a test. No language in common, just rule and divide. Fed us their flags, made us swallow our pride. They taught us to hate what we saw in the mirror. Now we pray to their gods just to feel clearer. Hey, we weren't even there. Split the bloodline. Names not our own. Borders like chains. Borders like chains. Still today, we carry the pain. Who gave them the right? Responsibility. Who let them rewrite? Not our bodies cold. Who drew the line? Through our soul. Colonial goals. What they stole, we'll reclaim whole. We are the story they tried to control. But memory's a drum and truth don't sleep. Our roots run deep where their cuts ran steep. Now we rise with fire in our name, burning their maps, reclaiming our flame. Burning their maps, reclaiming our flame. You carved us up. We rise again. One Africa. Yeah.
Let's change this setting. No, that one, definitely not that one. Nope. Let's get the right setting. Okay, that's better. All right. Hello, everybody. Greetings, 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 greetings. Welcome to another Alkebulan Awakening series in collaboration with Kumbukeni. My name, as always, Oladele Dosunmu. I'm the founder of the Emerging Alkebulan. And those who are new here today and those who follow us, you know what we're about. We're about decolonizing the minds and awakening our consciousness. Basically, what we're saying is Africa for Africans. We need to start building for ourselves without looking outwards. So, welcome. It's going to be interesting. Nduku.
Habari gani, karibuni, that is, how are you, what's the news, welcome, asanteni kwa kuwa nasi, thank you for being with us. I'm looking forward to today's conversation because I believe it's going to be more clarity as to how we move forward, so every opportunity to do that is welcome. Asante.
Fantastic. Okay, my brother Buka, if you want to introduce yourself to people who don't know you, please, to our worldly audience, please.
First of all, I'm grateful for being hosted by the emerging Alkebulan.
Alkebulan, yes.
Yes.
And Kumbukeni.
And my name is Buka Omole. I'm the General Secretary of the Communist Party here in Kenya. And I really look forward to having this important debate, at least to discuss some of the issues that continue, to be dealt with African continent and even the African people outside the continent, and how we seek, our total liberation as not just as a continent, but also as a people.
Thank you very much. Okay, the topic today, guys, is Buka is going to take us through the imperialism and the history of the communist movement in Africa. So he's going to go through that with us. He's going to take us through some history lessons. So just bear with us while he does that. So once he's done the presentation, and then, as we always do, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat and I'm going to start asking questions. So guys, just bear with us as Buka goes through the history of the the communist movement in Africa. Buka, let's do this.
It's important for us to learn from history because essentially, if we do not learn from history, then we will make the same mistake that the generations that particularly our forebearers made. So we also consider ourselves not as the beginning of the African Revolution or the Kenyan Revolution. We are a continuation of a process that have been ongoing. So if we are a continuation, that means we've inherited the history of the struggle for the liberation of the African and the African people from our forebearers. So I will start this discussion on trying to understand the emergence of imperialism and the absolute necessity of its counterbalance, which is essentially the anti-imperialist forces. Because, you know, when we talk about the struggle for the national liberation, this was a struggle for 1970s, went all the way to 1990s, and 1994, the youngest state, of course, the South African the South African state was born. But why did Europeans, for example, colonized Africa? For us, this is a question that, you know, tends to bring a lot of confusion in terms of understanding the root cause. Because in our own correct analysis is that we have the majority of the people dealing with appearances than the root cause of the problem. But if we can understand that the colonization did not take place just because a race was disliked, the African people was disliked, so they were backward. That's why they were colonized. But if we can understand it from the point of imperialism, that monopoly capital broke its borders and went rogue in search of cheap labor, in search of raw materials, in search of free market, essentially free but not free market. That's what I want to say. So this brought about the compartmentalization of Africa among the European powers at that time. And in essence, therefore, we want to say that the national liberation movement in the African continent was fairly dominated by anti-imperialist forces. Even when we appreciate that communism as a body of knowledge has its foundation in Europe, but we must also acknowledge that communism became an international movement for the liberation of the oppressed people after the first socialist experiment and the advancement of communism by African intellectuals. This is important. In fact, one of the best classics that I always refer, you know, at the Communist Party, Marxist Kenya, we have our ideological school. So we tend to understand, particularly, and that is why we take quite a bit of time in terms of doing analysis to see if we can scientifically analyze the circumstances in which we are carrying out our revolution. In fact, the Communist Party, Marxist Kenya, says that we are carrying out the Kenyan Revolution and the African Revolution in the era of Lenin, in the era of imperialism, in the era of monopoly capital. This is essential. So I also wanted to underscore, I had mentioned the classic of Walter Rodney, the relevance of Marxism in the national liberation of African countries. And I think Walter Rodney has several classics that people can read. In fact, he even did a critic for Nyerere on Ujamaa and scientific socialism. Even the other classic of development of underdevelopment of Africa. These are important resources that we can understand how communism, even though it has its foundation at the center of Europe, was advanced within the African context by what we call the African philosopher kings, or African intellectuals, or African revolutionaries. I remember in the 1970s, at the core of it, there was a debate between Julius Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah on how Africa should be united. And maybe I could, also the Communist Party here recognize itself as a Pan-Africanist organization. So it's also important also to bring, because at Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah, the debate was, should Africa unite through regional blocks, or should Africa unite entirely as a whole? And then the debate around Pan-Africanism came. It's important to understand who are the authors of Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism as an ideology, even though we have advanced it to the level that now it has its anti-imperialist content, but there is also the necessity to understand that Pan-Africanism was generally a petit bourgeois ideology that came outside the African continent. In essence, there are persons who believe that Pan-Africanism is an ideology that is native-born to guide the national liberation of the African people. There are others that also believe that Pan-Africanism is a movement for those fighting for the African liberation. And there are others like us who believe that Pan-Africanism is a clear objective for a united, free, liberated Africans and African people, those within the continent and without the continent, under scientific socialism. This is important for us. But in terms of looking at the penetration of Marxism and communism movement in the African continent, we must go to the thesis of the fight for the national liberation and the contribution of communism as an intellectual thought in driving that national liberation movement. Unfortunately, the comrades that were Marxist, that were communist, that led the national liberation movement in the African continent were murdered. Now, the question is that after they were murdered, because imperialism always want to take even the lifeless body, if there is anything remaining from it, you want to suck it all. And that is why Mandela now all of a sudden is a celebrity. That is now why everybody mentions Amilcar Cabral, but does not mention his radicalism, his Pan-Africanism, and his ideological orientation towards communism. Everybody mentioned, for example, Agustino Neto. They say Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was a hero. They say Thomas Sankara was a hero. They say Kwame Nkrumah was a hero. But they strip you of your radical in consciousness and present you to the people as a commodity in the market to be sold like any other celebrity. That is why they will say that Julius Nyerere was a good guy, but. So there's always a but to say that his socialist experiment failed, even without thoroughly doing a scientific analysis to understand why did those experiments fail and the circumstances that they were being carried out and the attacks, the external attacks that were actually. During the fight for independence, there were two nationalists. There were progressive nationalists. For example, if you look at the Kenyan independence, 1963, by the way, it's important to mention that it was a formal independence. It was not a complete independence. In fact, it was a negotiated independence where the Kenyan sovereignty was not returned to the Kenyan people, just like the majority of the African people. But the colonial flag went down and the political independence was raised, but the structures of colonialism were left untouched. In fact, the managers of the neocolonial state were essentially black, but they were mainly members of the petty bourgeois structures of the Kenyan society and home guards that actually auctioned their people that were appointed to manage the Kenyan affairs on behalf of imperialism or on behalf of foreign interests. So in essence, majority of the African countries, including Kenya, are still struggling for the fight for the national independence, the true independence. Because how is it possible that since 1963, Kenya has never taken off industrially, like majority of the African countries? How is it possible that just here, across the road here, where I'm doing the interview, we have the Kenyan industrial area? It is a big warehouse for cheap imported products. So how can you develop your country? What about agriculture? We have reduced into a raw material exporter of agricultural raw. In fact, coffee, Kenyan coffee, but only pickers are in Kenya. But the processing is in the Imperial Core. Tea Kenya, nice tea. You go to London. But the tea pickers in Kericho die less than 10 years on extreme cold when they pick the tea. But there is no tea factory in my country. So when we talk about, in fact, Amilcar Cabral placed it very well, that without the economic sovereignty of a people, there cannot be development. In fact, even the most urgent task, even if I talk about socialist construction, without national independence, there is no socialism. And that is why we have, in our own analysis, we have put forward to the Kenyan people what we call the National Democratic Revolution. That first we have to reclaim the land. Once we reclaim the land, industrialize Kenya, put light industries, heavy industries, have sovereignty in terms of technology. And until that economic independence is achieved, then we can be at the foothold of starting the true independence through development of whatever, for our understanding, the most urgent task is socialist construction. But we have to rescue the national economy. In fact, from the comprado class that is acting in the interest of the United States imperialism. In fact, without even mincing my word, I think we could say perfectly in this show that the primary aggressor is United States imperialism. Any country that is fighting for independence is under attack. Under attack. The whole African continent is under attack. The Sahel region now is breathing fire. Why? Because the subcontractor of the United States imperialism, France, has lost its foothold in the Sahel region. So, Macron came down here in Nairobi to say that he wants, cooperation, development cooperation. But development cooperation in whose interest? This is important for us to understand. Eritrea, we call it the Cuba of Africa, is under attack, sanctions every day, financial, cohesive measures to make sure. Remember the gallant project of Muammar Gaddafi, murdered by the black Barack Obama's orders. He simply just killed him and destroyed the Libyan state. So the emergence of communism and communist movement in Africa came as an absolute necessity as a counterpose to the imperialism expansion in the African continent. And also, it's important to understand that the slow uptick of communism in Africa was slowed down by European racist thinkers, including those within the development of Marxism as a science. Remember, Kwame Nkrumah and Nyerere went to school, maybe in Manchester, maybe in the Imperial Corps. So they actually encountered the racist thinking of the European firsthand. And even when they came to African continent to debate about the national liberation, it slowed their process even to deal with Marxism as a body of knowledge, when the primary authors of the Hegelian thought, which was Hegel themselves, are actually alluding that the African race are living like animals, innocent in the forest, that does not have any rigor of thinking. So this is the person that now you want to deal with this basis in terms of your administration. So we always say that in terms of African philosophy developed through reacting to European racist thinkers to try and, we were placed in a defense to try and say that, oh, wait a minute, just because I am black, by the way, I can think philosophically. So we had several other debates in terms of research. For example, the Nile civilization, the origin of mankind in Africa trying to find its authenticity in the global intellectual debates. And this must have wasted a lot of time to prove. I think even in terms of philosophical thinking, there are even others that went up to the Greece philosophers, for example, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, trying to say that they came to Egypt to learn knowledge. So it's important to understand that the knowledge that the Socrates and the Platos and Aristotle got from that went to Greece came from the African continent. This debate even brought in other philosophical schools of philosophical thought in the African continent in challenge of communism as a foreign ideology that has imposed upon the African people. This is important for us to acknowledge. And how imperialism has used this kind of phenomena to disrupt and cause confusion in the African continent is amazing. Remember, just after the independence in Kenya, 1963, the Kenyan parliament legislature was divided into two. There were people that were looking east, that is Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, that is Pio Gama Pinto, that is Bildad Kagia, and then there were the CIA sponsors that wanted to diverge the development of the Kenyan national, the new Kenyan nation. And they sponsored one Mr. Tom Mboya. I think one of the papers that Tom Mboya actually circulated was sensational paper number 10, African Socialism. There was nothing African about that socialism. In fact, it was just a petty bourgeois ideology. Even now, the communist movement after the fall of the USSR became very weak. In fact, now young people are coming to the Communist Party to seek for solutions, not out of primary influence from either the USSR at that time, because remember, during the USSR and the Chinese socialist development, the Peking publications, the Ethiopian publication here, where the communist movement was quite intense, persons used to go to embassies to get it. But now the young people are asking themselves, the neoliberal arrangement of the world is putting them deeper into poverty, deeper into backwardness. What is this thing called socialism? What is this thing called communism? And like we always say here in Kenya, is that those who hate communism are the privileged people. Though the beneficiaries of this status quo, they hate us dearly. They are very ruthless against us. They want to defeat us. They conspire. But also we must realize that we are a great threat to their positions of privileges. And therefore we must organize also a counter thesis to actually destroy them, just as they organize to destroy us, to build the glorious African project. Now, I wanted to bring about the development of communism in Kenya on the context of the competition of imperialist powers. Remember the classical British, the one that colonized us, lost its monopoly And the United States emerged after the Cold War and declared itself as a superpower. And then they started to fight the Britain in our country. In fact, the classical Britain, unfortunately, we still have remnants of the classical Britain in our country. For example, we have the military training here that has been causing a lot of problems. Even now we are on the streets. And remember, the United States have actually hired the British military base here to now take care of the Ebola patients. So again, you remember the imperialist logic is, the privileges are shared with the ruling class and the Washington War Consensus. But if it comes to underprivileges and even the risk, they are taken to the periphery. This is the logic of imperialism. But remember, the United States was funding the Kenyan multi-party through the NED, through the USAID, and probably may he rest in peace. But one of the people that led that United States offensive in terms of campaigning for liberal democracy in our country was the late Raila Amolo Odinga. And he washed himself through intense propaganda to emerge as a hero of reforms in our country. But remember, in the 1990s, when the colonial British was supporting single-party dictatorship, which was Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, that killed, slaughtered, and exiled many people. In our country, they like to revise history. So even a dictator becomes a hero some moment in books that I read. It's unfortunate for this. But the relaunching of multi-party democracy was a competition between the United States imperialism and the classical British imperialism. In 1997, the United States imperialism triumphed over the Kenyan economy and relegated the British and the French as their own subcontractors. So remember, in 1997, communism was an illegal ideology. We still had people, like, for example, the Leto Nyangolo, going to prison because of carrying a communist manifesto. We had people going to prison because of singing International, the most backward era of my country. But the United States, after launching their offensive, using their beachhead, that was Raila Amolo Odinga at that time, essentially declared Kenya multi-party democracy without communism. So all the anti-communist laws still remain in place. So this went on until the struggle against the Manchester Constitution. Because remember, during the negotiated independence, the Manchester Constitution was drafted by the same people who colonized us to give us freedom. I found that really mind-boggling, how I can entrust the person who killed my people, stole my land, writing a constitution to deliver me. Anyway, after the fall, what we call the ballot revolution of the 2002, all anti-communist laws were defeated in Kenya politically, but not legally. Politically, it means that everybody that was opposing Moi were mainly from the left movement. Majority of them were exiled. In fact, even though now, I always like to mention the Swedish Left Party. The Swedish Left Party now is a vacillating party. But at that time, it came to negotiate for our young communists not to be hanged. And if you go to a small town in Uppsala, you will find that there's a Communist Party office still standing there, where majority of the Kenyan people were exiled. But having said that, after the registration, the fall of Moi in 2002, it's like everybody in my country thought that the revolution had taken place. So they retired to write history, how I was tortured, to make themselves hero. It has been long fighting against Moi. They even took plum jobs in government, in Kibaki's administration. Some of them even took big jobs in the United States, USID at that time. In fact, some of them even were the head of Ford Foundation. These were Marxist thinkers. So in 2002 was a very anticlimax in terms of the anti-imperialist and communist movement in our country, because everybody surrendered. People went to court to receive money. You know, Moe jailed me for 20 years. So the court has allocated me 300 million. So I'm building some hotel and, you know, trying to live a good life and publishing books. So the CIA destroyed the movement there. So under the Social Democratic Party, the young cadres took up the mantle to build the Communist Party that was not registered until the unveiling of the Constitution 2010 defeated all anti-communist laws, but also importantly expanded the Kenyan democratic space. Because even though, you know, in Kenya today we say our constitution is progressive, but as we must understand constitution as a weapon for the ruling class. Its interpretation, its text, its spirit is used in the favor of the rich comprado class that rules our country on behalf of the United States imperialism. So the first Congress of the Communist Party was held in January 5th, 2019, after a long struggle. In fact, many of our comrades were martyred and killed in the streets. And sometimes we say we are grateful for, in Kenya, at that time, the South African Communist Party was also in government. And I remember the General Secretary of South African Communist Party coming to speak to President Uhuru Kenyatta with a view to even threaten him that you cannot be jailing communists while also trying to have a diplomatic relationship with South Africa, where the South African Communist Party in government. So that blackmail also worked for us to make sure that we were a legal entity. So in essence, what I'm trying to say that the uptake of the communism in the African continent as a liberating ideology was slowed by mainly the Eurocentric racist thinkers, mainly in the imperial core. And secondly, that there has been a lot of enormous contribution. In fact, one of my biggest books that I like was Africa, Socialist Africa or African Socialism, was written by a Zanzibarian. That is A.M. Babu, was a classic writer. And many other revolutionaries like Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah wrote about the class struggle in Africa, contributing to the body of Marxism as a knowledge. At the moment, I think we are in deep problems. In fact, in African continent, a few countries are independent and they are struggling, mainly the Sahel region and Eritrea. The others are captured completely by the United States as the primary aggressor. And for us, when we are fighting for our national liberation, there are ideas that lead us. We are not saying that just you're Marxist-Leninists. We are also taking from the national liberation that was started by the Mau Mau, Dedan Kimathi, as the immortal symbol of the Kenyan independence. We are contributing to the body of Marxists as the Kenyan revolutionaries, and of course the classics of Marxism. So those are the three trajectories that we see our country moving on. So in essence, I would like to stop that and then just welcome. It's better to have a conversation.
Then we can break it up a little bit. Okay, thank you very much for that. Just listen to what you're saying. My first question before Nduku comes in is you said the Marxism was born out of the struggle. That's basically how it came about. Is that what you're saying? The Communist Party?
Not outside the struggle.
It came because of the struggle, the liberation struggle of Kenya. Is that how it came about?
No, Marxism is a body of knowledge that was originally founded in Europe, but its uptake in terms of response to imperialism came as an absolute necessity for the Kenyan revolutionaries.
Yeah, we're saying the same. We're saying the same thing. So it basically came in because of liberation struggle, basically. Yeah, that's what we have. So, so my first question is, how has the Communist Party helped the liberation struggle in Kenya so far?
First of all, the revolutionaries, one important task of the revolutionaries is to try and identify the primary enemy. Who is the enemy of the Kenyan population? Because if we say that we are building the party of Lenin, that means the vanguard party, that which brings all the anti-imperialist forces to confront the principal enemy. I think the biggest contribution that the communist movement and the Communist Party has given to the Kenyan people is to identify the root cause of the problem in Kenya. That is not cured, there will be no national liberation. So we are saying that the big landlords are our enemy. So that means everybody who is against the big landlords, the conservancies, the white settler British that continue to steal, plunder minerals after the independence, you are our comrade. So let's fight together against the big landlord. It's the Communist Party that has come up with the correct analysis to identify landlord as a class and to mobilize people against the big landlord. This is a great contribution. The second one is the identification that Kenya is not really a capitalist country, but it is a country that is being held by the neck by imperialism. That imperialism even did not accept Kenya to develop to being a capitalist country. That the feudal relations that during the colonialism were adapted, the usury. If you go to the village where I come from in Siaya, everybody is in debt, comrade. The finance capital has penetrated even the remotest areas of Kenya to give loans in form of television sets, to give loans in form of, a phone like this that you buy off the market at 13,000 or so will cost you 84,000 usury. So how does the common man in Siaya understand how finance capital penetrates? This is the work of the Communist Party that has been able to outline even the plunder that happens on the mobile borrowing platform. How feudal relations have been adapted to fit imperialism in essence. What about the recruitment? What Malcolm X used to call the house Negroes, or the recruitment of the black race to oversee the affairs of the black people in the interest of finance capital and the United States imperialism. So I think the correct analysis that the principal contradictions that is facing the world today and facing the Kenyan people is the United States imperialism. We continue to mobilize the Kenyan population against that principal enemy. And the primary enemy is the agents, the foreign agents that want to administer our natural resources and our economy on behalf of the imperialism. And in terms of expansion, I think finally, in terms of expansion of the democratic space, I think the communists have played a major role. If you look at the number of martyrs, even last year alone, 2 years alone, the number of young people that were martyred in the streets were by and large young communists that placed their lives on the front line to make sure that they want to give a statement that IMF and World Bank may never have peace in terms of undermining our national sovereignty.
So what you're saying in essence is the fact that your party is probably the most anti-imperialist party in Kenya at the moment. Is that what you're saying?
Not just most, but the leading vanguard of the anti-imperialist front in Kenya.
Okay, because that's basically, from what I'm listening to, that's basically what I feel like you're saying. My sister is shaking her head there. She's Kenyan, so she might have other things. Anyway,
no, it's not.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right, let's go. Nduku.
So just to correct that, no, it's not. In fact, the protesters who are currently moving in Kenya have no certain identification as far as organization that they're affiliated with. Yes, they are members of the Communist Party in Kenya that are also involved, but no one, and in fact, this has been an intentional design by them to not identify who they're affiliated with, who their leader is. This is what they say. They don't want to do that because they have learned through history that when you identify a leader or an organization, it is co-opted, it is taken down. So they have intentionally not moved in a way where they identify with organizations or leadership. But that's a conversation for another day. So it is known.
That can't be a conversation for another day, because we are on a debate and it's a struggle of ideas. So it has to be given its own response.
Go on.
The fact that, you see, the spontaneity of demonstrations against imperialism crisis comes from an elevated consciousness from the mass base. And that is why the anti-finance bill of 2 years ago was not just about Ruto must go. There was the elements of the petty bourgeois that their economic interests were threatened by the Ruto administration. But the red flag that was raised, the anti-imperialist red flags that were raised on day 1, day 2, and the social explosion that happens on day 3, which we call a spontaneous one, in essence, was a culmination of activities within the Communist Party, Social Justice Center, and other anti-imperialist organizations.
Exactly.
That consciousness must not come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Secondly, you have mentioned that in fact, we did not call it the Gen Z, because Gen Z, of course, is a colored revolution that always, look at Nepal, for example. We did not call it that. The media called it that. And remember, imperialism always wanted to bring sociocentric issues to divide people around age. So it was never Gen Z revolution. I'm not a Gen Z myself, but I was at the forefront.
Neither am I.
So the idea around sociocentric and profiling of how to language, because language is also a weapon, and to communicate to the people was never any basis allowed upon the masses to decide. In fact, the Communist Party moved this correct analysis that when the masses said that they were partyless, it's not that they were more advanced. The only thing is that they were saying that they are partyless because the parties that have existed have auctioned them. So in actual, the Communist Party said that they were not saying that they are partyless, so that they neutralize the existence of political parties in Kenya. They were saying they were partyless because they were of their unquenchable desire for a party that is accountable to them. This is what we must understand. So we must not tail about the masses. The issue that we need to discuss is that the social explosion that happened on day 3 became a nationwide expression of consciousness that no particular entity can claim organization. And as we interpreted it as the role of spontaneity and organized revolution for the people. And we analyze it based on the Lenin's classic on what should be the attitude of revolutionaries be during spontaneity. And we have published an analysis for that. That is what I just wanted to put clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity.
And it's interesting because, and please, for those of you who follow Kumbukeni, pay attention to my posts. I'm not talking about my videos, I'm talking my posts. Because in those posts, I'm sharing what I'm watching. And I recently shared a video of Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, who speaks about this very thing, the need to organize and the importance of organize and the weakness in how spontaneous and reactional we are. So if you want to learn more about that, watch that video. He speaks to it. It is known that Karl Marx studied African and other communal societies to come up with a theory of communism. So his theory of communism is not devoid or is not a European construction. It's constructed by a European, Karl Marx. And just like his fellow Europeans, he stole and owned the idea without giving credit to where it came from. He is inspired by African and other communal societies. So my question is, given that he's inspired by that, and these are actually our ways that guided him to write communism, why then not as Africans reclaim communalism, which we know inspires communism, when we know it existed centuries before this so-called white man called Karl Marx came up with a so-called framework when we had been living, civilizing, maintaining peace, growing economies, exchanging amongst each other for years? Why not return to our way? Why seek an enemy's way?
First of all, it's important for us to understand that communalism is not only akin to the African race. In our studies of anthropology, the reorganization of the society in its primitive forms, where in our classics in the party, we don't say that before the arrival of the white man, as in Karl Marx classics, it talks about primitive communism, which is what you call communalism. And as we call it, advanced communalism.
Notice he calls it primitive. So let's yes. Notice he calls it
so as
primitive.
we call it advanced communalism.
It's kind of condescending already.
Yes. Why we call it that? Because Karl Marx was not born a Marxist. His knowledge developed out of time towards the process, just like myself. My thinking, my poetry, my writing has continued to improve since I was 6. So you can see a different book are developing, and that should be Karl Marx as well. First of all, Karl Marx was not inspired by communalism in the African setup. If you look at the classic of his his co-author, that is The Origin of Family, Private Property and the State by Friedrich Engels, an anthropological piece that tries to look at different races, different communities that organized before the development of classes. Because remember, there was a time in the African continent that we did not have differentiation, class differentiation. This is important. And the nostalgia of not having class differentiation at that time is that land, there was abundance of land. So we did not have any, if it was about the Council of Land, there were certain fights, intertribal fights, but the abundance of land, the abundance of food, the decommodification of children that happened during the communalism system must be understood as a more superior system than capitalism. This I have to make through. Now, there are others like Senghor, who came up with the negritude. Let's go back to our roots mentally and also physically. They want to unroll the wheels of history. This is interesting for me. But it must be understood only on the nostalgia of the plenty of life that the African people enjoyed during the communalism. But we must also appreciate the fundamental changes that have taken place since communalism. And its departure, that if you want us to go, sometimes when I go to several neighborhoods in Kenya, I get people saying, let's go back to our roots. You find somebody in his flat growing some vegetables at the balcony. I want to eat like an African people. But the thing is, Karl Marx, as the author of the ideology, that body of knowledge has developed beyond Karl Marx within the implementation of the context of the revolution. In fact, Lenin undertook the Russian Revolution under the era of imperialism, Stalin under the dictatorship of the proletariat, and Mao, the modern peasantry and the backward countries of the neocolonial. That is what led to the development of that body of knowledge. And others have developed. I've mentioned Amilcar Cabral, I've mentioned Julius Nyerere, So when we talk about the inspiration of not studying the African as a society at that time, it probably could have been an omission because of the racist tendencies of the ideologue at that time. But that does not in any way demerit a process of its scientific, grounding. And also that does not demerit the advancement of that knowledge from Marxism to even now I hear people calling
Booker, you keep using the word. Sorry, my brother. You keep using the word scientific. This is scientific. That's a Urugu kind of concept. Why do we have to be scientific about some things that we do? The word scientific draws from European mindset.
For us, what we understand is that there is objective reality that exists independent of your thinking. And once you appropriate knowledge that reflects that reality, that congruence, if it reflects the true reality, then it is in the truth. Then we have a clear, our theory of knowledge.
I understand that, but it doesn't have to be scientific. It doesn't have to be scientific.
Wait a minute.
It doesn't have to be. Hold on a minute. It doesn't have to be scientific.
A bit of philosophical environment. Okay. So let me land my point. So, okay. Because you're saying scientific is a European conception. I don't agree with you on that. Otherwise, then. You know,
the focus of
it. If we say scientific, how do we depends on how do we arrive at truth?
So quickly, just
this is important
as you answer. Can you hear me?
To arrive.
Can you hear me? Just quickly before
hold on.
What we are saying is not just that scientific is a European concept or framework. It's the use of it to minimize our way. It is the use of it to take the importance of our way away. So every time when I say Ubuntu, they're saying it's not a scientific practice, so it is not enough. So the use of scientific, of the term scientific, to minimize and almost disqualify African ways.
Please know that Ubuntu is a disruptor campaign in the continent. Just like African socialism was a disruptor campaign. Ubuntu is a clear African thought that developed before the differentiation of classes to mean I am because we are, but we cannot be I am because we are when you're propertied and I'm not propertied. When I'm a landlord and you're not a landlord. I cannot be I am because we are when you are a billionaire while people are dying of curable diseases. So Ubuntu was a solid call for brotherhood and solidarity around the perfection of the communalism of the African society. When the classes were never differentiated, when the oppressor was not that ruthless, it's impossible for me to call Ubuntu now when Ruto is killing young people and still calling about Ubuntu or brotherhood, because the society is continuously being differentiated between the oppressor and the oppressed. How can it be Ubuntu anymore? So we must not call it Ubuntu. In fact, last 2 months ago, and I tell you this, Nduku, with a lot of passion, while the young parliamentarians here had a big conference here in Nairobi.
I actually do want to address
the aspect of looking for an indigenous ideology to liberate the African people. In fact, when you say that science has been used as a way to silence the African method, I would like to say that also the defense of sending bourgeois intellectual to seek the indigenous African method to solve African problems has been basically been
just 1 minute. Hold on.
Sponsored by the enemies of the African continent to cause confusion in the African continent.
Just hold on 1 minute.
And at the moment, we don't agree with the Ubuntu campaign.
Hold on. So just 1 minute. What you're talking about right now is actually really important. I agree with a lot of what you're saying about it. I want us to address it in a very good way. So don't mix it up with the scientific. So put it in the side if you can. Just write it as a note that we need to address the Ubuntu.
No. We are talking about
hold on,
language.
Please hold on.
Listen,
hold on, please. Because hold on. I'm trying to be patient with you. So hold
listen.
Book, let her land, and then you can come in.
You know, she's gonna bring some confusion on the perspective.
No, I'm not. I'm avoiding
confusion. Let her finish, and then you can come in.
I'm avoiding confusion. That's what I'm doing. Let's address the issue of scientific, and then I'm asking you to write on your paper, because I actually do want to give good time for this Ubuntu issue that is happening on the continent, because I do agree with you. I don't want us to mix the two together. So let's address the scientific part first. Write on your notes that we are going to talk about the co-option of Ubuntu in Kenya. Please.
On scientific issues, please. From the field of philosophy, how do we arrive at true knowledge? This is how it is different. For us, where do true knowledge come from? Because when you talk about science, is it just some test tubes in the lab, or what are we talking about? What about in terms of social sciences? I think from the Marxist perspective, which we believe is the correct perspective, is that all knowledge, all true knowledge, come from social practice. This is important. All true knowledge comes from social practice and direct experiences. So when we're talking about a scientific process, when we're talking about a scientific analysis of the Kenyan society, we are talking about interrogating of facts that emerge from social practice and direct experiences of that society in terms of advances of the national liberation, and not any perspective of the oppressor.
So this is, again, I'm going to show this quickly before I address that, right? This is from the book Yurugu. And as Mama Marimba Ani describes what European culture looks like, she has images, and this is one of the images. Sorry, this is one of the images. I'll try to get as close as I can.
What do you call European culture, Nduku?
Hold on. This is one of the images. The top part is European culture that separates who we are. It separates you. It doesn't allow you to be one. You have to be this or this. It separates you. And this is African culture, where everything is in one circle. Everything we do, everything about existence is in one circle. Everything. And it's all interrelated. And that's who we are. So, and even when you describe scientific and don't hear ourselves and how we are so Europeanized, and Europeanized in a way that's anti-African, that we don't even hear ourselves. You say scientific is interrogating of facts that arise from social interactions. I'm paraphrasing.
From social practice and direct experiences.
Exactly, right? That what that says, especially if Karl Marx is putting that out as a way to show that communism is better and it's good, and this way is good because it's scientific, and African ways are not scientific, is to say African people did not. No, hold on. I'm responding, please. Is to say that African people.
You are pushing an ideology that is my framework, so I will have to confront you.
Yeah, you come back. Let finish.
Things. I think we need to be a bit more respectful on this, especially when Nduku wants to push a certain way of thought. There are three things that you mentioned that I don't agree with. First of all, that needs to be covered.
You're going to wait for me to finish before you say what you don't agree with.
Let her finish and then you come in, please. Let's be orderly. Let her finish and then you come in, please. Let's do that. Let's be respectful of each other.
I want to know, I am not in the business of being respectful to oppressors. So that is not my agenda. My agenda is actually to disrespect them and prove that they are not as superior as they claim to be. So do not expect me to be respectful to white people and white frameworks, or European people and European frameworks. Let's get that right, first of all, before I continue.
That is your mind frame.
Second of all, that's okay. Second of all, to say that science, as you describe it, to refute or to denigrate African culture is interrogating.
I haven't said that. I haven't said that.
You didn't. I am perceiving. I am now addressing it from my critical analysis. I am now slicing it. Yes, you didn't say it because you didn't hear yourself as you were talking that you were being anti-African.
No, I will not accept that. Nduku, I will not accept that.
I heard you, and now I'm explaining to the
now
people.
I'm gonna address your
about
issues.
What you said is
because
anti-African.
I think that's not the purpose of this debate. It's a battle of ideas. So we are not here to to tolerate each other.
No, we're here to defend Africanism.
Yes. So it is your show, yes, but you have also to have to accept my perspective, because you're pushing those narratives you're pushing. I don't agree with them.
I don't have to.
That's fair enough, but let's just have a debate, guys. Let's have a debate. We're not going to agree to disagree, but let's have a debate.
She has kept on paraphrasing me
incorrectly.
I'm not paraphrasing you.
Incorrectly. In fact, she's been saying I cannot understand myself. I cannot listen to myself speak. What kind of rubbish?
You cannot hear yourself and the anti-Africanness in what you're saying.
No. I cannot do that.
Let him clarify.
Don't paraphrase me. Confront the ideas with an alternative, superior argument.
Clarify, please.
So I want to demystify the way you have wrongly paraphrased me.
Okay, no, clarify what you said, please.
Clarify what you're saying. We need clarity.
First of all, I've said that there are two different theories of knowledge. But When I talk about interrogating of facts based on social practice and direct experiences, this did not exclude the African people. So don't say this is a conception to say that the African, because African had their own experiences. African had their own social practices. They had their knowledge. So the universality of that theory of knowledge is beyond race. That's one thing.
Did Karl Marx consider African race?
That's my point. That's my
Nduku,
point.
let him finish, please. Let him finish.
I'm saying social practice. Even monkeys get social practice. They have direct experiences. So what I'm saying is that when I talk about interrogating of direct experiences and social practice, I do not undermine the African race. That is what I wanted to make clear, that the African race itself has their own experiences and social practice, and they also have a view to systemize their knowledge. And if you want me to give you a few examples. The second one, the issue of culture. I don't come from that school of thought of categorizing culture based on geography, European culture, African culture. You can talk about European traditions. You can talk of African traditions. But when you're talking about culture in a class society, the culture of the haves and the have-nots, whether they are Europeans or non-Europeans or whatever tribes they are not socially divided in that sense. If you talk about the rich man culture and the poor man's culture, how they eat, how they dress, their kind of music, it is not only race dependent. But we could say it's how they activate their productive forces to gain their economic life that advances what a superior and a backward culture is. So this is the two things I wanted to clarify. On the issue of culture and interrogation of facts and social practice, not to be just a European thing, but also an African thing.
I'm going to read something quickly. This is from a video, and I'll share this video. I think I did share it in the comments. This was said by Nana Amos Wilson in a video he did about culture. And he says, culture is a set of rules and procedures for meeting a people's needs together with a supporting set of ideas and values. Culture involves a set of rules and procedures for meeting needs. You don't claim a culture just because it's a culture. A culture must solve problems. Culture comes into existence as a way of solving problems and meeting needs. And so, first of all, before I even address the fact that the term that is being used to describe what scientific is as interrogating of facts is an anti-African term, because it essentially says that what we did not interrogate facts. So when we're talking about Ubuntu is not enough because it doesn't interrogate facts. Because from the perspective of European culture, they don't see us as knowing how to interrogate facts. And this is in many books that they have shown that Africans are, again, Karl Marx calls it primitive communism, right? Primitive, why? Because it does not interrogate facts. And that is racist. It is racist. But just to ask you real quick, what is the African language word for scientific? Anyone, especially those of you in the comments talking about science in Africa, what is the African word? Give me one language: Kiswahili, Luo, Kamba, Akan, Yoruba, Igbo. Let's go down to the south: the Nguni people, Nkosa, Zulu, although Shona. What is the African term for scientific?
Nduku.
What is the African term for scientific?
Nduku.
Let's answer that question, please.
Nduku. Language and is just an expression. Without a people, there is no language.
Language is not just an expression. Language is culture. Language is everything. First of all, what is the African term for scientific?
I don't accept that. I understand language in the field of the abstract. For example, you are Nduku.
So we don't have an African term for the word scientific.
That's your name. It's just a collective agreement to call you Nduku.
Do you know?
So the absolute truth is that you are Nduku. No. So there is nothing in Nduku that is strange. We just agreed to call you Nduku. So in language,
no, you didn't. Are you serious? Okay, mute him real quick, Oladele, because I need to say this without interruption. No, I need to say this real quick without interruption. Or I'll ask you, my brother, instead of muting you, please let me say this. Nduku is not just Nduku.
So you're pulling even powers to mute me on your show.
No, because you're interrupting and you're not letting me explain. I'm not pulling powers.
And I want to respond.
Listen, I have not been able to complete a thought.
You have just been reading textbook excerpts, about...
My name is Nduku, and it's not just because it's Nduku. And you had nothing to do with selecting my name. It wasn't given to me just because it's a name.
But
my name
is it true you're Nduku? Is it true you're Nduku?
See why we need to mute him?
Because your name was given to you, right? Are you going
to wait for me to talk so that we don't have to mute you? Or will you keep talking while I'm talking? It's as simple as that.
Carry on, my sister.
Thank you. So make no mistake to anyone listening today. And my focus is African people. Names are not just names. My name, Nduku, is not just a name. And maybe this is why we have ridiculous names out there, because we have people believing names are just names. And we need to change this today. Names are not just names. I have gotten on people's cases when we get in meetings and they're calling Oladele Ola. Oladele, please unmute and explain to people what your name Oladele means. Oladele, just Oladele.
Oladele means wealth. Yeah, has reached home. Wealth has come home.
But break it down. What does Ola by itself mean?
Ola means wealth. Dele means home.
Exactly.
Means home.
So if you take Ola from Dele, you have taken away the hope from the wealth.
What is your point? What is your point?
I am making my point. If it doesn't make sense to you, brother, just be patient. It makes sense to someone else. Just be patient. Ola is wealth. Dele is hope. His parents made no mistake in choosing that name. Because in your hope and holding on to your hope, which my brother has done because his name has been given to him, it's your wealth. And if you call Ola Dele, Ola, you're taking away the hope from his wealth. That's just one example. I am Nduku Mulumba. If I go to my place, if I get lost today in Kenya, and I'm in a neighboring area to my place and I say my name, they will know where I come from. Buka, immediately I see your name, I know you're Luo.
No.
Yes, I do. Immediately I say,
and you
this is you denying your Africanness, because this is a fact that is known by all Kenyans. You know it, you're denying it.
Nduku.
Immediately Jerry
This is not a lecture show. This is not a lecture show about your mastery of language and how it expressed yourself.
You're not my only audience.
This is not a master. This is not a lecture show. You don't know. You cannot tell me that you know my name.
Let land.
You see,
let her land. Let's get somewhere. Otherwise, we're not going to keep talking. Let's just one at a time.
And I'm going to say that let's give a thesis and let everybody contribute to that thesis.
Yeah, let her finish. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere.
Every time about all of
that. Let her rant.
What I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is this. If you're going to moderate the
wait.
But I'm not going to. I'm not going to sit here listen to backward.
But this is what we do. This is what we do. We challenge everything. This is what we do on this platform. We break it down.
But
I told you this.
I don't expect.
Let her finish.
First of all, she says things and they're gonna get.
Yeah, but let her finish, and then you can respond. You have a right to respond. Let her finish first.
Then let us allocate. How many minutes do you want?
Yeah,
because you've been talking. How many minutes do you want?
It
is 20:09. How many minutes do you want? I give you.
Let her finish. Let her finish, and then you can come in, please. Let's be civil.
How many minutes does she want? She's been talking all along.
No, let's see what she has to say.
Look, how many minutes do you want?
I am not doing that. I'm African. Welcome to the African world, my Europeanized brother. We don't have minutes in this world. We talk.
We don't have
make
minutes.
your point, and you stay patient and you wait. Because you're not.
Make your point.
Then you can choose who you want to interview and lecture. Let me tell you, Nduku, I'm not going to accept it because this is a battle of ideas. So if it was a show to demonstrate how Africanized you are and how European I am, unfortunately, I am not going to undertake that.
Guys,
I cannot do that. This is a battle of ideas. You can silence it just because it is your show.
People are listening. People are listening. Let's just break it down one by one.
People are listening, but what I'm saying, let's take a basis and let's all contribute. If you are the one moderating the show, let Nduku contribute on a basis, because
let her finish. Finish what you say, and then you can come in.
Okay, what are we discussing about now?
Yeah, let her finish. She has a point. Let her finish.
The value of African names, that you're Europeanized
but
mind.
I am called Buga because I'm a Luo.
You undervalued the value of African names. That's what we are addressing. I'm trying to clean out the Europeanization in your mind. I'm decolonizing your mind and other people's minds. That's what I'm doing right now, because you are clearly Europeanized.
Maybe if this was
what's your point? What's your point, Nduku?
Am I able to make it?
But
yeah, finish your point, please. Finish your point. Finish your point.
While he's talking.
No, finish your point, Nduku. Just go.
I've actually muted myself to listen.
Okay, thank you. If I say my name, if I was lost today in a town adjacent to my town or somewhere around where I come from, they will say, oh, the Mulumbas, they live there. We know them. They will take me home. That is the power of names back where I come from. Omole, as much as he's denying, and there's a reason why he's denying, and I have diagnosed it in him, immediately he says his name. And you can ask him when we come back on, I greeted him in his own language when he came on, and he responded. He didn't even ask me how I know that language, because I'm Kenyan. And in Kenya, we go to school with each other and we learn each other's languages and we embrace each other and then unite in Kiubuntu Kiswahili. We find our unity in it. And therefore, for me, every time we talk about African unity and I see a Kenyan fighting it, I'm like, you are what's the point? You are the example, the epitome of how unity can be achieved in Africa, because in Kenya it is. So if you say Njeri to me, I immediately know you're Kikuyu. And for those of you who've had the privilege of talking to me or who have experienced talking to me and you mention a name, I will say to you, oh, are you this? Are you that? I had a brother so surprised that I found out where he came from, that I actually found out the exact location where he came from, that he was from Mount Kenya because of his name. This is the power of names in Africa. So let's not dismiss that. And only a Europeanized mind would do that, because that's what Europeans do. I even forget what I was addressing. I said, what is the African language word for scientific? There's none. There's none. We had science, yes, but we didn't call it science. We called it maybe the study of sun in our own languages. We called it being one with nature. That's science. The fact that you as an African will sit there and say that that's not science, that Ubuntu is not science, you have to stop and ask yourself, why am I thinking this way? When I know my people invented science, they may not have called it science, and they did not call it science, is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We need to move away from saying scientific. And I'm bringing this up because I've been in room with communists here in the United States, in Brooklyn, where they do that. I start talking about Ubuntu and they smash it down, talking about it's not science. And I would love you to stay on, my brother. I want to respect you, but I'm not going to allow you to not let me speak. But I want you to stay on so that we can speak about this co-option of Ubuntu in Kenya, because it's a real threat. And you have experience and I have experience with it, and I want us to address it. So do not go anywhere. Please build the patience to go through this uncomfortable conversation. Thank you.
Booker, you want to go now?
Now, first of all, I disagree with the conception of culture as she has read it in her own text. Let me deal with specific issues. Culture is a way of life of a people. Culture is bold. Culture is born and reborn in the struggle for the national liberation. Culture is defiant. This is culture. Culture is not some traditions that some group of people practice at certain epoch of their development in the society. In a class society, there is no segmentation of culture. In by and large, if you do what we call the summing up, you will find only two contradictory cultures. The culture of the haves and the have-nots. How they live their life depend on the access of the global economy. If you're alienated from the global economy, why is it that when Nduku leaves Kisii and comes to Nairobi, she passes a place called Naivasha, she gets people that are making soft woolen things to step on the bedside, made on the ship. How is it possible that these things that are made are not found in their houses, but find their expression in Karens and the rich neighborhoods? That means the poor man's work finds its meaning. What about the wall, the paintings? So, to clarify the aspect of culture, culture must not even be, it's not just a system as it wants to be said, of certain guidelines or certain, we say that culture is born and reborn in the struggle. And every day we see culture, divergence and convergence on the haves and the have-nots, or the property and the propertyless. On issues of language, because when you're dealing with philosophy, there is the abstract, those in the abstract, like in the field of mathematics.
Booker, and also, I just kind of, based on what you're saying there, in talking about philosophy, who's philosophy? Carry on.
First of all, even philosophers.
Who's philosophy?
Even philosophers themselves cannot agree what philosophy is. This is important. But for us, we say that there is no philosophy, again, above any scientific investigation. In fact, in our correct perspective, philosophy is the collective knowledge synthesized from all the sciences to define all reality. So, as materialists, we start from the material foundation, from the general to the specific. That is our theory of knowledge. The other theory of knowledge can be based on certain metaphysics and other field of African hallucinations or whatever traditional hallucinations. But in our own way, we say that philosophy is the science of all reality. But I know for a fact that depending on which philosophical traditions you are from, we don't, the metaphysicists don't agree, because they say that there could be some knowledge that is from above, or there's some knowledge that, can, whatever speculative knowledge, we don't take that, seriously when they tell us that. So in terms of philosophical traditions, what I wanted to say is that in the field of philosophy, at least all of us agree, whether you are from the metaphysicist or idealist or a materialist, we agree that there is the field of the abstract and actually the field of the objective life as we live it. And in the field of language, even if you want to understudy the people's thinking, you can study language. You can study the Yoruba language. You can study the Luo language to try and understand their culture at a specific epoch. But just how they express themselves at that time is not, in actual sense, enough to explain to you their cultural art. You have to go beyond the language. So, in essence, even what my sister Nduku was saying, that just because there was no word for science, it doesn't mean that there was no science. We already know for a fact that there were people, in fact, in Kisi that were surgeons even before the arrival of the white person. We also know that, for example, there was, I think, in terms of the African philosophy, we can remember Odera Oruko, the philosophy of sages, the sagacity, trying to go to the hinterland to find people who had never interacted with the European civilization to see if they were of worth of thinking, of philosophical methodological thinking, of rigor. So I still want to insist that when we're talking about interrogation of social experiences, social practice and direct experiences, it is not any way geared towards an African race even though I've been struggling with these race equations on this, Black Pan-Africanist movement, but because they try to say that the primary enemy is white supremacy, and that race is at the center of it, and the unity in terms of fighting anti-imperialism, need a Black person's unity, which for me we just think is a nostalgia talk.
Do you actually believe what you just said?
It's a nostalgia talk, in essence, because for us, we see in Kenya, for example, regardless of which community I come from, which language I speak, what determines me in terms of access to dignity in the Kenyan context is my access to the national economy. As long as I'm alienated with the national economy, regardless of my circumcision practices, regardless of my proverbs, I still will not access life with dignity. In essence, let us not call traditions as the people's culture. Those are traditions in themselves. Culture is transient. Culture is manufactured and produced in the struggle. It's even defiance, even borrows the white man culture. Otherwise, Nduku will not be putting on the clothes she's putting on today. You know.
Okay. You muted, Nduku.
My clothes are not the white man's clothes. Get that right. My clothes are most of the times designed by me. I will send the message to the brother and
Booker,
say,
deliberately, we never wear anything Yoruba. It's intentional.
This is not the white man's culture. And in fact, the white man is very
uncomfortable during the Industrial Revolution, where did they start the textile industry? Why
you don't even know that there was a textile industry in your own country that has been taken down by the Europeans. Like, you don't even know that. There was a huge textile industry in your country that was taken down by. If you don't know it, I'm sorry, brother, but go look.
My brother. Don't forget, we clothed ourselves before the Yoruba came. You know,
yes,
we actually clothed ourselves.
From us.
In my Yoruba language, we actually clothe ourselves. We have traditions.
Technology is race blind. It can emerge from anywhere.
The beauty of this session is that
the law of even development
of what a Europeanized mind looks like. I'm going to ask something.
Will you use penicillin? Where did penicillin come from?
Do you know how they made penicillin?
Yes.
Do you know what herbs from us and knowledge from us that they stole and made all the medicines that we take now? You think was not African generated?
Just a nostalgia African.
No, it's not. It's not nostalgia. It's a reality. It's the fact that we've been
African Europeanized.
Booker, we've been miseducated to think otherwise. That's the problem. I'm in the belly of the beast.
And you don't even realize you're laughing at yourself.
I'm in the belly of the beast. Yeah, I'm in the belly of the beast.
Unroll the wheels of history. It's impossible.
No, we're not.
No, history is there.
We are unrolling.
You are like Sengo. You know,
Booker.
We can serve the people, Oladele. Let's ask a question so that we can serve.
Okay. Yeah. Let's run it up now, guys.
You say that this is not about race. Why then have eugenics if it's not about race? To this day, eugenics. To this day, if it's not about race.
Did you hear about that Planned Parenthood?
Why then is this African man writing this book, Condemnation of Blackness, and there's many policies in the United States that are anti-black? Why then?
Redlining.
The U.S. government, why does it commission W.E.B. Du Bois to do a research in Philadelphia, a predominantly black community, to study the vices of black people? Because black people tend to have vices. Why do that if it's not about race? Why make it about us and not humanity if it's not about? And also, in the policy of enslavement, why say that we are a third human? We're not human if it's not about blackness. They didn't say that about the Italian. They didn't say that about the Irish. They didn't say that about the Asians. Why then does the white scientist go through all this, spend all this money to show the different craniums, the head, the skull of the African, the white, the Asian, and arrange them where the African is the bottom if it's not about race? Why?
First of all,
don't dance around this. Answer why. Why did they do that if it's not about red?
Loco,
do not dance around.
Shut up, and I'll answer the way I want
you
to.
See, disrespectful.
But these are facts, though. These are facts, Booker, because they are facts.
It's not the fact that you repeat their facts. You listen to my.
But they are facts because it's documented. We've seen it.
If they are facts, then why are we debating them?
No, I'm saying she wants your perspective.
Just to listen and confirm their facts. Then there's no.
No. Wait. She's asking, what do you think? Because you said you basically said that there's no racism.
Anything, but
okay, go on. Let's go on.
You want me to say, Nduku, they are facts? Continue to the next question.
Yeah, carry on.
Let's say you answer the question to very specific. If you're saying it's not about
how I want to answer the question.
No
you want
way.
Me to answer
you're going
your
to
lenses.
listen.
It's impossible.
No, yeah, but you got your own lenses.
If you say it's not about race, stand by your claim. Why then did these white people do all these things against black people in medical?
I have understood your question,
in medical apartheid. Harriet
you
Washington gives an
probably
example
take
of a
charge and
slave.
control Nduku?
Gives
Because she has already asked the
example
questions.
of
Is
an
this
enslaved man.
going over?
Nduku, let him go now. Nduku, let him go.
I'm not. I'm
Let him
going
go.
to make my point. He will not control it.
Nduku, let him go. Let him go, please. Let him go. Let him go.
No, Oladele. In medical apartheid, Harriet Washington gives examples of Black people being tested and tested. Black people. And these white people are talking about they need to find out. They cut Black women open, their vaginal area open with no anesthesia, because they claim apparently Black people can withstand pain. They put a Black man on coal to understand why Black people do not burn in the sun, because they want to understand why.
Will you allow me to answer the question?
I will allow you when I'm done.
Because I'm running out of patience. Because I didn't come here to listen.
You need to be patient, boss. You need to be patient. You need to be patient. You need to be patient.
If all that is happening,
because you asked me questions, you have not even allowed me to answer them. But
let her finish. Yeah, go on, Booker. Go on.
It will be useless to have this discussion with you.
Go on. Your chance.
Yeah, so I want to analyze the question of racism. First of all, there is a lot of truth in what Nduku is saying. But we must differentiate appearances from the root cause. This is important for us. Now, when we are defining race for us, in our own perspective, there are two types of racism that we see every day. One, there is systemic racism. That is hardwired in the political, social, and economic institution to generate white privileges and Black underprivileges. This happens in the United States. So in the United States, racism is structured in essence. It has power, it alienates the people, it creates even the white supremacists. I don't see anything different from even the people who talk about Black supremacists. They're just the same. The second race is individual racism. For example, if I go to Beijing, I meet some Chinese racist in the plane or in the train. They can call me a monkey. But for a fact, I know that if they harm me, the Chinese government will punish that racism. So in that case, it is racism without power. So those two racism must not be confused. The second is that when people want to hide from the root cause of the problem, they bring social issues, sociocentric issues, to alienate you from your dignity. So they want to say that the Black race is demeaned just because it lacked melanin, or it has melanin, for a fact. So they want to weaponize racism. And weaponize racism is to blind the African person to know the source of dignity. This is why they are saying that, for example, any sociocentric divisions, they will either divide you in form of race, they will divide you like in my country in form of tribe, they will divide you in form of, Christian and Muslim, they will divide you in form of age. So any minority who wants to rule a majority must divide a majority of the people on sociocentric issues to hide the root cause of economic violence. In the United States, where you're saying that racism is hardwired in the system, which I agree with you completely, don't we have Black people that are oppressing the Black people in America? Don't we have the Black celebrities, for example, that appropriate from the finance capital and commodify the African race, to be used only to sell consumerism?
It's important for us to acknowledge that. So in my correct perspective, I would say that race is a factor, but it is not the primary contradiction in the way the global neoliberal globalization is arranged. The neoliberal globalization arranges that poor countries, black, brown, or even some white, are poor because they're being dominated through the neoliberal project that currently is being supervised in Washington. And as so long as that neoliberal project continues to advance itself, the black working class, the white working class will continue to be expropriated. Even now, we were trying to discuss the other day why there are frequently high octane riots, for example, in Paris or in London, for example. As so long as the British ruling class and the French ruling class are not robbing as much as possible to bribe their own white working class in their own countries, then the class struggle in their own countries between the workers and the propertied class will continue to even be intense. That is why we say that the biggest solidarity that the workers in the Imperial Core can give to those who are organizing for their national liberation outside the Imperial Core is to challenge their own criminal administrations and deal with their own contradictions at home while giving solidarity to the advancement of the national liberation movements here. In essence, I do not totally agree that race does not matter. I also do not totally agree that race is the only determinant. But I say that by and large, race indeed has been used to discriminate the black population, to enslave them, to oppress them, and to isolate them from the root cause of where they got their dignity, which is through economic activity. So that is why when you go to Congo, they will hide from the mineral resources and from the work, and they divide the Congolese people around backward tribalism. Here in Africa as well. Why are, for example, there are always tribal clashes between the Kisis and the Luos? Why are there the tribal clashes between the Kalenjins and the Luos? In essence, that the Comprado ruling class here in Nairobi would like to continue to divide the majority of the Kenyan people to see themselves in their tribal identities. In fact, the crisis that now we are facing in the world is neoliberal identity politics that people like Nduku are spreading across in terms of trying to spread identity politics while hiding the root cause of the problems. You can mention essentially that the black people have been oppressed, but can you explain why they have been oppressed? The black people have been oppressed because they have shared the history of oppression, they have shared the history of slavery, colonialism, and now neocolonialism. And they have not been oppressed because they have melanin in their skin and others don't have melanin on their skin. This is something that we must continue to, to expose, especially within the black radical community or the black Pan-Africanist community, who want to say that the isolationist politics of advancing the black race will therefore lead to the liberation of the black race. For us, we see our oppression on the position that you occupy in the social production, how the social production is organized. Are you a working class? Are you a peasant? Are you a property class? Are you propertyless? This will determine how you access dignity, how you access culture, how you access medical services, how even you access entertainment, how you dress. Like, for example, if you are dressing like an African because you have an African designer, how many poor Africans cannot afford an African designer? Just because you are dressing from an African designer does not make you more African than my relatives in the village who suffer the fate of imperialism, having to dress up in the second-hand clothes that have been imported from the imperial periphery to the periphery, because the companies that used to manufacture the textile, the clothing in my country, from Endre to wherever, after the neocolonial project and the SAPS project of the World Bank were actually finished. And in fact, even the AGOA program of the EPZ now, the African people are manufacturing new clothes to be taken to the imperialist countries to be dressed in new, while they put on second-hand clothes. All our cars here are second-hand. So in essence, what I'm trying to put through in this debate is that you can dress, like Kwame Nkrumah, you can dress with African design, but at the very end of it, you can afford to dress like that because you have the means, you have the economic means to have a designer. But my grandmother at home only puts a campaign lace that has been distributed by, a politician. So it doesn't make anything more African or not. The idea is that we need to finish our formal independence in Africa under the National Democratic Revolution, declare our economic sovereignty, and develop our productive forces, and make sure that we are, we can play the game of equals when we are relating on country to country. But anything that is diversionary to isolate the African race from the entire working class base, and to make sure that, to even allude that just because you're black, even Ruto here is black like charcoal. Is he any better than, than
Ruto is not black.
the administrators of the, if I talk, you'll say I'm heckling, but then you heckle me when I'm giving my
I'm
talk.
sorry, go
So
on.
I hope that you can actually mute your mic if you cannot keep quiet like I did before. Then it's better for us. So what I'm saying is that the administrators of the Nairobi administration are actually appointees of the United States of America. They are black people. Just because they're black, we cannot force ourselves to be in unity with them. The sellouts. So I violently disagree that the only cause of the unity can be because of my blackness of the skin. I cannot accept that.
Oladele, I have a quick question before we continue.
Yeah, go on. And then I got a question. I got some question for the audience, so we're going to round up shortly.
Yeah. We are at war right now, Oladele, right? Who would benefit if we chose today to move in this war with that idea that it is not about race? Who would benefit and who would lose? Oladele, I'm asking you. I'm asking you.
The Eurogo will benefit. The Eurogo will benefit
if we don't fight as if it's a race war.
The Eurogo benefits.
Right? So who would then drive that as a way of moving forward?
The Eurogo does, because divide and conquer.
Exactly. So I'm going to go through how racism starts. I don't have all the facts, but I'm just going to give what I have encountered. And we have people adding in the audience. This starts all the way from the Moors going into Europe. And Europeans at that time are in a bad state. They're in a bad state.
Would you like me to answer that question you asked him, or you want us to assume?
No, you can answer when I finish this. It's actually coupled, so you can answer when I finish this. And they're not bathing, they're sick, they don't have food, they don't have schools, and the Moors educate them. The Moors civilize them. They teach them how to make medicine, they help them build schools, they teach them how to do things. And while all of this is happening, there's something else also happening. Mansa Musa, I'm not mentioning the dates, you all can correct the dates. Mansa Musa is traveling with his gold, and he's going into spaces where he encounters Europeans. And so Europeans are getting curious because they're in a bad state. They don't have enough food for producing food. They want to understand, where is this place where these people are coming from? And they start going to explore and to look for this place that these people are coming from. And they discover Africa, and they discover Africans, and they see these melanated people that are not burning in the sun while they're burning, because they're in Africa, they're under the African sun. They see these people who are not dying from the diseases that are killing them. They're being killed by the mosquitoes left and right. Malaria is destroying them. To one point, they almost gave up being in Africa because of malaria, until they started testing on us. And through testing on us, they started finding cures for the diseases they could not handle. This is how it all starts. And therefore, they also found resources while they were there. And they discovered this genius thought. These people won't give these resources to us. But not even that. Because of their nature, they don't want to share. They're not going to ask to share. They want to take it all. They want to take the resources and the land. What I'm describing now, by the way, is what I would do to a child. So walk with me. I'm not trying to be academic. I'm not trying to fit your European standards. I'm an African telling a narrative about our people. And we're sitting under the tree in the Mbongi. So when I'm describing, it will not meet your European standards, and that's okay. You'll get over it. And so these Europeans decide, because we do not like to share, we're going to take over. But the only way we can take over is to create this false narrative that we are superior. And wait a minute, there's a God. They've observed our ways of practice, our spiritual ways of practice. There's a God, and the God is male, and the God is white. And his angels are white too. But when they fall to hell, they're black. In hell, they're black. The bad angels are black. The devil is black and red. The devil is dark. And they create this narrative. And why do they do that? Because they want to take over the land for themselves. And this is written, the Kaiser's Holocaust talks about these Germans talking about all earth is theirs, is God-given, and they must remove who's on the way to have access to it. And therefore, the only way that they're going to get free labor, which they seek for back at home, so that they've already invaded the indigenous people, they've already taken that land, now they need labor to go, because they cannot do it. They cannot stay in the sun. Because in the United States, there's a few months when they're growing, the sun is too hot and it's burning them. But they've discovered people who don't burn in the sun. But they don't want to pay them because they want maximum profit. They want to keep everything from themselves because they're Urugu. They don't share. They don't have a communal culture where they share. So in order to do that, they decide to come up with racism. We are white, they're black, they're inferior, they're not human. And everything since then has been about race. Capitalism, technology, everything has been about race since then. Policing, every single thing. What you eat, how you eat has been about race. And so you gave the example of I'm wearing what I'm wearing because I'm privileged. If today, which I almost did, I decided I'm going back to Kenya with no money. And I asked you all, because you've all seen my GoFundMes and my help me with this and that. I'm surviving right now because of community. I'm housed by family. Just last week, I paid a phone bill because a friend sent me money. I'm not privileged. I'm not working. I'm waiting for the schools to open so that I can go back to work. But even then, they're not paying me well enough for me to get my own home. So I'm not privileged. But if today I decided, my people, please help me, I want to get back to Kenya, and I got on a flight and I get back to Kenya, I will go to my neighbor who sold me the land I have right now and say to him, because he has invited this, listen, let's make a deal. I will help you with these skills that I have. I will educate your children. I will teach them Swahili. Can I have one goat? And can I have a male goat to impregnate it? He will give me that. And I will get multiple goats from that one goat. And my tailor, and I know this for a fact because I'm Kenyan and he's Kenyan. If today I took a goat to him and I told him, could you make 2 dresses for me for this goat? Or how many dresses can you make for me for this goat? He will make the dresses gladly and take the goat. So please, don't talk to me like I don't know who I am or where I came from or what our culture is. This is not about money and privilege. I know exactly what I am because I'm African. And only African culture will allow you to survive without money. Only African culture will allow you to survive without money. And I just described it. Thank you.
Nduku, you are a Black African person from Kenya. What do you share with my mother or my sisters in the village, other than the color of your skin? You even privileged in the sense that you can use a Zionist platform, GoFundMe.
The food. When your mother cooks ugali, if you actually caught me and I come and be your wife, your mother will be like, what a lovely wife you got Omole. She can cook ugali. She can cook fish. She can sit and I said hello to you in your own language. That is what I have in common with her.
You will listen until I put. We are not going to tolerate any heckling. You will listen to me. The truth of the matter is that even if you are to eat ugali, because you are Black and your culture is that you eat ugali, the quality of your ugali and the quality of my grandmother's ugali will be different. The second thing is that my grandmother don't have access to GoFundMe, which is a Zionist platform that you can use to raise money to finance your life in the imperial core. So you're a privileged woman.
She doesn't need GoFundMe. She can text me on WhatsApp. If I have money, I'll send her $20. There you go.
You listen. So even when looking at the women question, we don't look at you just as a woman. We look at your class position as a woman. A rich woman and a poor woman do not share the same struggles. Here, we have people who are dying, women of cancer, that have not even have the privilege to be diagnosed. They are black women. You are also black. There are people here in Kenya who have never seen a dentist. They are black women, and you're also black. So what I'm trying to put to you across, that the issue of culture, as we understand it, is in the superstructure, and it is shaped from the substructure, which is how you access your economic means. Now you are putting on a pair of glasses because maybe you want to see well. My grandmother cannot afford that, and she's black and a black woman. So there's nothing that unites you with my grandmother at home other than the melanin in your skin. This is important for me to tell you, because sometimes the privileged black African people want to actually launder the blackness, to commodify the blackness, to appropriate any life that exists around the blackness.
I dare you to say this in front of your grandmother.
In terms of their own survival.
Say this in front of your grandmother.
And they must not, all these academicians that are studying about blackness and non-blackness, are they benefiting from it? So we must continue to articulate that the poor black race and the rich black race are not sharing the same struggles. The factory owner, black, in Algeria, in Nigeria, I think we have one of the richest billionaire. Does he share the same struggles as the communist peasants here that I organize? No. So my greatest departure with your frame of mind is that for you it is either race matters or doesn't matter. But for me, I'm saying race matters as so long as it has been weaponized to divide the people, to deal with appearances and not to see the root cause of the problem. To that extent, race matters. But the primary contradictions in the neoliberal arrangement of the world, and the biggest threat to it, is the identity politics that is being sponsored and spread by European and United States foundations to make sure that they are spreading neoliberal identity politics to divide even the oppressed masses of the African people. Our responsibility as revolutionaries is to unite the majority of the African people against the minority of the African people who are privileged, that continue to cause confusion in the African continent while they are indeed enjoying privileges like you. This is important for us to move across. That to unite the African people is not to unite the African privileged minority just because they're black, but it is to unite the suffering majority of the peasants in Kisii, the peasants in Luo Nyanza, the peasants in the rural areas. Like, for example, our country, 73.4% of the Kenyan population live in the backwardness of the rural areas. Black, they are, but they share different struggles among other black privileged people that lives in Nairobi. So, in so far as the primary contradictions in the world is what we disagree on. Race can be another contradictions to deal with. But until we continue in the cultural sphere, in the propaganda sphere, to defeat the imperialist propaganda that we have only been segregated, that we have only been undermined, that we have only been oppressed because of our black race, but we must also continue to bring the artifact of truth that the exploitation, the oppression of the people in the world is based on expropriating the work of their labor. When you take natural resources, you appropriate the work of the people's labor, you undignify them. So the privileged African person is not having the same struggle and the same culture as the African person staying in the backwardness of rural life. Even your burial will not be the same like the burials I attend in the peasants in the village. We call it magogo. They bury themselves in the most rudimentary way. They do not even have a will for that matter. They do have nothing to show for it. The only thing is their means to ache like every day and to be actually pondered by the broker, the usury, the imperial capital that has penetrated, the Coca-Cola, the multinationals, the finance capital, white or black. Look at now, if you go to the rural areas in my country, if you look at the 1 acre fund, this is United States multinational in cooperation with the British multinationals, introducing chemical farming to delude the African so-called people that you say from their traditional organic farming. But who is responsible for this vehicle that helps to exploit the majority of the peasant people through borrowing of fertilizers and farm inputs? Black people like me and you. What to credit the biggest robber in Kenya, where the what to credit gives motorbikes to young people, and these young people pay 10 times the price of the motorbike until the next motorbike and pay insurance rate. These are not just white people doing it. The real brokers of that exploitation of finance capital are black like me. So, in essence, race does matter, but race is not the primary contradictions in which we should organize. But in terms of defeating the imperialist propaganda and demystifying the race question, we must be at the forefront to tell the African people that the only way to develop our continent is to develop our productive forces and to fight through to death around our economic sovereignty. And economic sovereignty is to take care of our political independence, to manage our affairs, and immediately, for us, we will not stop at the National Democratic Revolution. We will start the most urgent task of building socialism towards communism, because our task as revolutionaries, and as socialists for that matter, is to build socialism towards communism. So I agree there have been false narratives, but we must look at which position, black, white, or even pink, or whatever color you are. What is your position in social production? Are you at work? Are you part of the reserve army? Are you jobless? Has capitalism rendered you jobless? Have you been alienated from the national economy, from the global economy? That will determine how you access dignity or non-dignity.
Final. I think that's it for me actually, because the time is fast spent. So yeah. Booker, thank you very much for coming on our podcast. I'm sure you find it a bit challenging, but this is what we do. We break it down, man. It's uncomfortable conversations, but we have them. So because we have to have them, because we are educated. We are educating people.
In the last couple of months, I've been on the rare of such podcasts, but I think
so we need to educate our people. Our people need to know what's going on. They need to know what's going on, because miseducation is one of the biggest challenges confronting Africans today. So we need to get these things out there. And once again, thank you very much.
It's a battle of ideas. So
yes, it is.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming.
Yes. We hope
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye. Okay, final words from you, my sister.
I showed the image before because as the brother was speaking, it was either this or that, and only a European culture looks at things that way, either this or that. We Africans understand that we can deal with class and race and spirituality and agriculture and everything else at once. No one is telling us that if you deal with this, you're letting go of that. No, right? We understand that. Only a European mind knows it is separated, and only a European mind. And I'm suggesting to all of you get the book, because it will help you understand the enemy that we address, and it will help you stop going around and saying things like our oppression is not this. That is the most idiotic, most ill-informed, most anti-African thing to say. I see a lot of people in the chat, I'm assuming they're communists. That's the only conclusion I can come to, having an understanding of who communists are. Talking about we have to mix the races. How am I mixing races with people who are anti-African? How do you do that with the people who are anti-African? Show me today a white person that is out in public risking their job by standing with Africans. Oladele, you have an image of me when you disappear. That is hilarious. I'm glad it brought some lightness to me when you did that. And we have to find humor even amongst conflict. That's how we get. But for me, how do I join with white people when they are anti-African? When I'm walking on the street with a white person, they're going to see my black colleagues or my black comrades and hold on to their past tight. When it comes to it, if today in the United States or wherever we are in a community with white people and there are no resources, they're going to say they need to get access before me. And this was said while the white women were fighting for their rights. They literally said black men cannot get rights to vote before white women. If anyone, based on the hierarchy, should get the right to vote, it should be white women, because white people are superior. So how can I interact and join with those people to fight for liberation? What is wrong with you all Africans who are saying this? And I'm saying that to you so that you can go and look at yourself in the mirror. What is wrong with you? Have you not asked yourself the question, what is wrong with me, that I think I should be in community with white people when white people are out here killing us and I don't see them standing up against it? What is wrong with you? And can you please get the treatment ASAP so that our people stop dying? Again, I shared the image to show, and I will explain real quick, Oladele, what this image means. I do understand we've stayed, and I also need to go. I'll read it fast. This is on page 98 of Euro-American Worldview. The European view, the human is in one circle. The self, the affect, the subject, the ego, the self-consciousness. There is a gap between the two circles, a very wide gap. And in the other circle is non-human phenomenal world. And it's other men, nature, invisible beings, concepts. And these are objectified. They are the it. We, to the European, are the it. We're an object that can be exploited and used for their own service, for their interests. And then there's the Africanized worldview. Human equals person, thou, utu, muntu, right? In that circle is human beings, nature, concepts, invisible beings, self, subject, affect, ego, phenomenal world, self-consciousness, other men. And the task of the African is to bring Ma'at in all that, is to maintain Ma'at, so that all those aspects of existence, all those aspects of our being stay in balance and to reduce conflict. We understand that conflict comes, but our task is to maintain Ma'at. What does that mean? I'm not out here building with concrete and cement when I know it's destroying the earth. If I start seeing the earth behaving differently as I do that, I change my way of building to maintain balance with earth. The other day, I was looking at my garden. I had decided to plant my herbs with flowers. And I noticed that my scallions and my arugula was not doing well. And I saw this flower had taken over. It grows like a vine. And I had to take that flower out because I understood it was destroying the ecosystem for the other plants. It was taking too many nutrients for itself. I literally did that 2 days ago. And I took out the flower and I said, next year when I plant, I understand that this flower needs to be in its own space. It has its role because it brings bees, but it cannot be in the same space with the arugula and all the others because it's taking too much nutrients and killing them. This is African. This is science in itself. It's not called science because we don't have that language. Now we do. But that is science. And that's what I'm saying. We have our way. And our spirits are calling us. I've answered the call. My brother clearly hasn't answered the call. When you answer the call, you start seeing how you move in an African way. So I will absolutely fight you and see you as an enemy if you're denigrating that culture. if you're shaming it, if you're saying it's not valuable, I will take you down. You're lucky I'm not holding a machete and taking your head off. Thank you.
Oh, this one is to you. I want you to answer this question, please. Can you say
question to you, Nduku. Why do the rich black ones condone that rubbish and throw the black majority behind? Why they go dine and wine with the white? That needs to be addressed, because they're not black, they're European. And the nature of the European is to take for themselves. You see them as black, but they're not black. And in fact, when you ask them to be black, they will fight you. They don't want to be African, because black is African, right? That's what we're talking about, African culture. Let's call it what it is. They are not African. That's why they're behaving the way they do. They're behaving like Europeans because they're Europeanized. My brother, as he gets on here and criticizes me for having access to GoFundMe, he leads a large party in Kenya with funding, and they have their own house in the city, and they have access to internet on all kinds of resources. And I bet you today, if he and I went to their village and he said the things that he said while his grandma is there, she would either slap him in the face or tell him, sit down, my child, because you need some talking to. I do have a lot of similarities with this woman. And if you all don't see that that's anti-African, that he actually got on here and said that I don't have similarities with his grandma, and the only thing that she and I have in common is our skin, I don't know what to say for you all. Thank you.
All right, finally, guys, we have these conversations basically for us to think, break the cycle. Most of us, and I say this categorically, most of us have been miseducated by the Europeans. Our worldview and our thinking is basically European. We all struggle to actually think like Africans. And that's basically why we are where we are today, because we're all thinking like the Yorugu. The moment you start re-educating yourself and start thinking, okay, as an African, how can I solve these problems? How can I do this as an African? How did my forefathers and my ancestors live? How did they build communities? We will solve problems. But as long as you keep going to the Yorugu solution, which is basically individualistic, it's basically greed-driven. And unfortunately, I saw some questions that people talking about capitalism. Capitalism is greed-driven. You look at Africa today, we have capitalism as a system. How many people do you think is going to make it in a capitalist system when they have no capital? How many? So everybody is basically trying to be a capitalist when they have no capital. So the system is rigged against you from the outset, but you're all trying so hard to be part of it. Why don't we build a community where everybody comes together, pull together, and build together collectively? This is a solution that we Africans need to embrace. But for some reason, because we've been so miseducated, that we think in the Yorugu, what is right? Whatever, Western civilization. Western civilization, for somebody who lives in the belly of the beast, Western civilization is actually destroying people who live here. It's basically destroying people. If you live in the West, then you see exactly what I'm saying. We Africans still have something unique about us that we cannot afford to go their way. The more we keep going their way, what we're doing is we are basically destroying our own culture. We are destroying what's unique to us. So guys, we have these conversations for us to decolonize our minds and do something differently, because the way we're going and everything that we're doing right now as Africans is not working for us. We need to think differently. Anyway, once again, thank you all for watching. We're back in about 2 weeks' time. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels, please. Kumbukeni, the Emerging Alkebulan. We're on Substack, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, we name it. We're everywhere. Just search Kumbukeni and the Emerging Alkebulan. Basically, we got so much stuff there. And like Nduku's got that book there. Please, sometimes you need to educate yourself. This book here, Yorugu. Mama Marimba, I'll let you can go. You tell
yes. So this coming Sunday, August 16th, join us all on Kumbukeni. We're going to have Mama Marimba Ani with us.
Yes.
And we're going to break down Yorugu, and we're going to listen to her. It's going to be a conversation with our elder. It's going to be a mbongi. So bring your African souls with you. It's going to be an African one. So try very much to destroy the white man in your soul this week. Start today, right now, and destroy him, because you're going to struggle through the conversation if you still bring the white man with you. I understand it's a heavy task, and you might not completely remove them, but remove the Yorugu infection before you. I need to bring humor sometimes, for it's humor, but it's not humor at the same time. It's seriousness. Remove this week. Work very hard to remove the Yorugu infection from you. What do I mean? Start paying attention to the things you're saying and ask yourself, why am I saying that? Why am I thinking this? Why don't I look at the African culture past? And I've been doing a lot of shorts to push you all to do that, where I'm trying to show you what Africanness is. And I'm going to continue doing that. So this week, be intentional about that. Ask yourself, why do I think that this phone is better? Why? Why do I think that this phone is better? Huh? What is this phone doing to my people? So again, this coming Sunday, August 16th, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that's 8 p.m. Kenyan time, and all the others, you can figure out what the time difference is.
Please, that's one you don't want to miss it, because that's the author of Urugu, Marimba Annie. That book is seminal. It's maybe one of the best books out there. If you haven't read that book, you need to get that book. Yeah, so for the level of consciousness, yeah, go on.
Oladele, this thought, and you finish, I'll let you have the last thought. This thought of Africans on the continent thinking that just because people are in the United States or the UK are doing well is a flawed thought, if I ever saw one. There are Black people. Yes, there are white. Me saying I don't care about them is not recognizing their humanity. Me saying I don't care about them is because I have so much work to do with my people, and if I'm not caring about my people, I better care about my people first and only for this moment. And guess what? When my people are well, they by default always are well. This just happens. But here we go. A lot of Black people in the United States, the UK, who don't know what they're eating today. A lot of them through the system that has stolen money from us on the continent and elsewhere, they get social services and they're made to feel like they're beggars. That's their money that has been stolen from them. Even here in the United States, there was a time where during Reconstruction, Black people were heavily taxed and they never benefited from their tax. Guess where the tax went? To building neighborhoods for Jews. Yes, I said it because that was the case, because they were resettling Jews here. That happened. And other white people. They benefited from the taxation on Black people, and Black people never got any help from social services. Eventually, civil rights people are now getting social services. So just because people in the United States don't think they're doing well, a lot of our people are suffering in these foreign lands, suffering, sleeping. At least you're in Africa where it's sunny all the time and the cold is not that bad. Sleeping on concrete outside in the cold. They're announcing, I'm getting alerts on my phone. Today is too cold, dangerously cold. Like you could die. And a lot of them die during the winter. So please don't get this confused. It's about Blackness. Oladele. You're muted.
Like I said, it's about us. This platform is about us. It's about us basically doing what we need to do for ourselves. It's about us doing the work that we need to do. Because a lot of us don't want to do the work. We rather copy and paste systems from the Urugu thinking it's going to work for us. Thus far, whatever you're copying in Africa today is not working. It's detrimental. So it's about time we start doing the work, the basic work, to actually build community, to actually empower and develop ourselves at the African way. Because the Urugu way is definitely not working. And it's evident to see unless you're blinking and blind and you can't see it. Anyway, have a good evening. And we'll see you with Mama Marimbani next Sunday. So make it a day.